Hello, welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkandstuff.net. This is your interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your host, Scott Dr. Scott Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the First Guide of Funk. If you don't have your copy, please go over to Amazon and pick one up, or at least give it a look. Think of it as the program to Truth and Rhythm. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, I thank you very much for your continued interest and support. My guests today are the Dunning sisters, Denise, Bonnie, and Dolores, as well as Solomon Roberts Jr., all of whom fronted one of the best-known funk R&B dance music groups of the 1980s. I'm talking about the fabulous Skyy. Formed in Brooklyn, New York in 1973, when the singing Dunnings first met guitarist, drummer, and vocalist Solomon, they then went on to fill out the Skyy band roster and spent several years working to perfect their unique sound and craft. Along the way, they teamed with record producer keyboardist Randy Muller, the leader of Brass Construction and also an arranger from BT Express. They then signed to Salsoul Records in 1979 and released their self-titled debut album. After releasing several albums packed full of some of the most infectious groove-heavy tracks from the period and finding moderate R&B success, Skyy crossed over to the mainstream in a big way with the release of its fourth album, Skyy Line, in 1981. That record featured the super tight, funky smash, Call Me, which topped the R&B singles chart and led the album to the pinnacle of that chart as well. The rest of the 1980s, though, saw Skyy struggling to repeat that success. And when its label Salsoul went out of business midway through the decade, it left the group bouncing around to labels and recording less frequently. However, after signing to Atlantic Records, they launched a major comeback in 1989 with the release of their Start of a Romance album. It spun off two #1 R&B singles, the title track and the Quiet Storm classic, Real Love. Very unusual for a band to be successful at the tail end of the 70s, have great 80s success, fall by the wayside, and then come back with #1s, two #1s, incredible. And also have hits basically through 3 decades. Unfortunately, Skyy's next album, 1992, though, Nearer to You, failed to catch fire and proved to be its last. Although the group never released another studio album, since 1998, the Dunning sisters have continued to perform to backing tracks as the Ladies of SKYY. They continue to do that today, and I urge you to go check them out. Take a look at their calendar for 2018. With its Brooklyn funk sound that augmented Brass Construction's heavy rhythms, driving horns, and inventive arrangements, Skyy added to that mix with a feminine flair and pop R&B sensibility to leave behind a 13-year treasure trove of recordings for all of us to enjoy. Originally, I was pleased as punch to land the Ladies of SKYY for this episode of Truth and Rhythm, but what was most unexpected and additionally fantastic was the news that I was going to get the opportunity to also interview the man who was so instrumental in the whole Skyy thing, in what was to be a rare reunion for this show. So here, from Mr. Roberts' neighborhood, if you will, it's actually from his kitchen, is my special, wonderful time getting to know the full Skyy story with Denise, Bonnie, Dolores, and Solomon. To reference one of their great hits, Here's to You. I am so very pleased to welcome to Truth and Rhythm original members from Skyy. That, of course, is with 2 Ys. One of the most successful funk R&B dance music bands of the 1980s, and which were produced by Brass Construction's Randy Muller. So glad to have you reunited for this very special Truth and Rhythm. How's everybody?
Great. Wonderful. Doing just fine.
It's a beautiful thing. Reunited, it feels so good, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I'd like to just edit the introduction. We were produced by Randy Muller and myself for our production company, Alligator Venom.
Perfect. Yeah, great. We'll get all into that. Thank you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce each of yourselves? Solomon.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay. He's ever the gentleman. My name is Denise Dunning Wilkinson.
My name is Benita Dunning Williams.
Dolores Dunning Milligan.
And Solomon Roberts Jr.
Fantastic. So glad to have you. So you're coming, I understand, today from Delaware, correct?
That is correct.
Yes, we descended upon Solomon's house The three of us are originally from Brooklyn, New York, now all living in New Jersey.
The four of us.
The four of us.
us.
I forgot about it.
That's
That's right, Sal. I'm so sorry. Yeah, we were all originally from Brooklyn, but we defected about 10 years ago, and Solomon defected just 2 years ago, right?
Okay.
In a manner of speaking.
I officially got here last month.
Right. So yeah, but yeah.
Great. Well, I have Brooklyn roots. My mom's from Brooklyn. My father's from Coney Island. So
Oh, wow. So,
yeah.
Close enough.
So ready to mix it up? Get into some questions about the wonderful Skyy?
Sure.
ready whenever you are.
Fire away.
Fantastic. So want to just go back before Skyy for starters, and just a little bit about how you grew up as sisters, and I'm assuming it was a very musical household, and how you first got into music, and how you pursued music before you got professional with it. So ladies first again.
Well, we started singing. We sang at people's weddings, but in high school, we all joined the chorus in various stages of our high school careers. We always sang in mixed chorus or girls chorus, and it was always something that we wanted to do. Our aunt, matter of fact, used to sing opera, and she also brought us this big reel-to-reel tape recorder that we used to practice on in front of the mirror, and just acted like we were the supreme. So it was always something that we wanted to do. My mother and father both had extremely beautiful voices. I would hear my mom singing while she was ironing, and my dad always had all of these 78 records that we used to play at my grandmother's house. So music for us was always in our blood.
And it was even in high school. At one time there were four of us. A good friend of ours named Deborah Hunter, and we all went to the same high school. And as my sister said, we used to perform in a lot of talent shows and do weddings and so forth. And so music just was always in our blood. And we had a great choral teacher named Miss Lynn.
Yeah, Mrs. Lynn, Antoinette Lynn was her name. She was a very exacting vocal coach, as well as, choral, head of the chorus in high school. We went to Franklin Delano Roosevelt High School in Brooklyn. And at that time, they had a very great musical enrichment program there. We had a chorus, we had a band. Actually, we had several choruses.
Yes,
you could join a mixed chorus, you could join a small music theory. Everything was there available to us. And so my sisters and I took full advantage of that, performed in every talent show in high school, right?
Sing.
And every sing, they had these things called Sing. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that.
Yeah, no,
but it's like basically a play for the grades. And always wanted to be and emulate the groups that were popular during the 70s, during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you also, I believe you did music at school too as well, huh?
Well, that's where the first part of Skyy sort of got put together. I grew up listening to the radio, listening to music, and enjoying everything, and then started to try to sing along with it. Then I started to try to beat along with it. And then I got the pots and pans, and then my father, coming from Baptist church, decided, well, he's pretty musical. Why don't we give him some music lessons to play the piano, and then he could play in the church. But I tend to sort of shy away from the piano. I still wanted to start beating on the pots and pans. So eventually I got a set of drums, and he gave up on the piano lessons, but I welcomed the background that I got when I was taking it. And then from there into high school, I just started looking around for, other musicians who like to play. And I found the guitarist, Butchie Sierra, in high school, and I found the bass player also, Gerald LeBone, who was in high school, Thomas Jefferson High School.
Right.
and we had sort of the beginning parts of Skyy, and it wasn't until later on that we decided, we needed to round ourselves off a little bit more, I sort of met Randy Muller in the same school, and he had his group, and we became friends because we both sort of had group, and both were trying to get our music out there. And he was fortunate enough to launch his group first, and after he did that, the ladies were actually singing along with them prior to that.
Yeah.
So I'm skipping along with it and missing out part of the whole story. So I'm going to stop at this point, and then you can start filling in on your part and your connection with Randy.
So I had a question first. It's just real quick, Solomon. So at that point, when you formed that band and you guys were just getting the beginnings of the band, what types of groups were you covering, and what was your influence? They had talked about the Supremes. What were you playing?
We were playing Jimi Hendrix. we were playing at the beginning. We were called Fuel, and we were playing more sort of rock and R&B sort of flavor stuff of that nature. And it wasn't until we actually met the ladies that we decided to take and mix the rock and the R&B together to have something a little bit different, with a little more sort of classier sound.
Commercial sound, right? Classy. Okay. So we brought class to the group. It's nice to know this. See, this is something I hadn't realized, that we finally brought some class to these guys. What I think I find the most interesting is that we were having this duality of lives in Brooklyn, but they were, as he said, he was in Thomas Jefferson High School. We were in FDR High School, and we didn't really meet one another until what, 1970,
at the
72, 73.
Miss Black America
State Finals.
Yeah, that's when we met Solomon, and we came in. We had there was a gentleman who was overseeing that whole pageant, and he brought us in as singers. And Randy, as Saul said, had already had formed Brass Construction, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, these girls say they could sing. These girls say they could sing," and we auditioned to sing in the pageant. And Randy was wowed, and just like Saul said, then we actually started singing with them for a little while.
It was like a second act to wherever they would go play. The band would play, and then the ladies would come out and do part. And then finally they got a chance to cut a record. And at that time, they were
16 of us.
around. No, first of all, there was about 13 of the guys.
In Brass Construction. We're talking about Brass Construction.
And even that was too many for the group to be signed, which eventually got cut down to 8.
Right.
And then the ladies was 4 of them. I basically told Randy, I said, I'll take these 4 off your hands. I'll take the, and then, we talked. I said, you'll like to sing with us, and then we can form a new group, no longer Fuel, but something better, something different. And then we agreed to start working together, and then we started putting together some material. And at that time, Randy's album had released, it went platinum, so he had some sort of track record and credibility, and he wanted to now, go off and do something on his own as a producer. So we decided to form a production company, which would then produce Skyy, and that production company was called Alligator Bid Him. And after forming that and start cutting tracks, we then start shopping the tracks, and he found a home at Salsoul Records. They liked what they heard. They bought the album, and that was our first album.
So when you guys were coming up, did you kind of fall into your harmonies naturally, or how did you decide who would mostly sing lead and how you would do that?
Well, because we are sisters, in case people weren't quite aware of that, I think we always have genetically, we know which note we're supposed to hit. In addition to the fact that being trained again in chorus, and again, this was like high-end, vocal training, we knew our voice parts. So it was not hard to figure out who was going to sing the top note, who was going to sing the middle note, who was going to sing the bottom note, because our vocal ranges were identified for us when we were in chorus.
Exactly.
So we knew exactly what, you know, which notes we were supposed to be
Sitting in
singing.
what section?
Yeah.
And we were more influenced by the male groups than we were the female groups.
That's Temptations.
Temptations, Ray Goodman and
Ray
Brown,
Goodman
then
and
known
Brown,
as the Moments.
Manhattans. I
The
mean, we
Miracles.
were more the Miracles. We were really influenced by the male groups, and not only could we sing, but we could dance as well. So that's where our choreography came in, because the female groups, they could sing and, you know, they did their little hand steps, but we wanted to really entertain. And so that's why we really became influenced by the male groups.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, you know, each of you met Randy Muller in different ways. You know, what was it like? Well, I want to know, what was your impression of both Randy and Solomon when you first met them?
And remember, you're at
Well,
my house.
we are at his house, and our stuff is upstairs. We've got to go a long way to get our stuff if we have to leave quickly. So, you know, it was funny. Again, as Bonnie stated, we met Randy because we were babysitters for the gentleman who was directing the pageant. He was the program director for the new Miss Black America New York State pageant. And so we sang at his house all the time. And he said, I have this guy who's in charge of the music at the pageant. And so you guys are gonna basically sing for him. So we sang the Temptations, Old Man River, a cappella. At the time, there were 4 of us. And he has often said to us, you know, when this guy told me that we got these girls that can sing, he was like, yeah, sure. Everybody says they got girls that can sing, except that we could sing. So he was kind of blown away by this. And he was like, wait a minute, okay. So I got to work with these girls, not only for this event, but for this event and beyond. So when we first met Randy, oh my goodness, we were all so young. We were so young, but our initial impression of Randy was that he was very accomplished musically, because he was directing that band. He was arranging the music. I don't think we understood the full scope of his talent when, you know, at the initial meeting. It wasn't until we actually started to work with him over time that we really got to see just how, you know, multi-talented Randy was. Solomon in the beginning was just the guy kind of hanging around on the side taking pictures, right?
Yeah, I was a photographer. I also had a station wagon that helped lug the equipment around.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't know that I had a band or I was into music until a little bit later on.
Right.
And
it took a minute before
yeah.
we knew that you actually played an instrument, because he was always the guy taking pictures. We didn't pay him much mind. You know?
And not only did he play the drums, but he played.
He learned guitar.
Right, the guitar. And he was like, he's multi-talented. But like Denise said, he was always kind of, you know.
Yeah, he was the periphery guy. You know, he's standing around
Yeah.
on the side, and then all of a sudden, Randy, you know, after we started doing all the brass construction shows and they got so big and they got that deal, I think that's when we really realized that you did have a band. You know what I mean? I don't think we were too sure.
He's not the driver.
Right. Yeah, he's not the driver. The photographer. Yeah.
Sounds like Solomon did whatever needed to get done at the time.
Yeah, it's true.
I had the station wagon. I had the basement that my parents didn't mind to have a lot of noise. So if they needed to rehearse, and I had even recording equipment.
Yep.
So it was the hub of where everything got done. All of Brass Construction's albums before they were done were sort of demoed in my basement, and we call it the Hole in the Ground Studio.
That's right.
Yes. And so it was just a progression of meeting them and then starting to work with them in the basement, and then coming up with Skyy.
Tell me what it was like when you first heard the brass construction thing and how powerful that was. What was your first impressions of that whole, you know, because you guys, the whole thing around you and Randy was kind of you know, there was a common thread in the sound and the presentation of all of the groups that were part of that, you know, the production group or whatever. There was definitely a thread in the sound. So what was your impressions when you first heard that brass construction sound? It was very powerful.
I think for us, well, we had worked with Deborah's brother's band. So we'd only worked really with one live band prior to that. And they were pretty okay, you know, they carried everything. But I think with brass, we knew we were, we had stepped it up a notch.
Yeah, especially
because they were really, because of the horns in particular. That's a great point.
Yeah, because of the horns. Because Deborah's brother's band was lead guitar, bass guitar, drums, and keyboard. And then once you added those horns, the brass construction horns, it became a whole nother thing completely. Yeah. So it rounded out the whole sound that we were really feeling in the back of our heads, things that we were missing, just singing with two guitars, you know, a keyboard and a drum. It just made everything so much more real.
Yeah. And then we're working with a band, brass, we're working with a band who's doing original music. Yeah. Not just doing cover songs, because the previous band, you know, we're doing Temptation, so we're doing cover songs. We're working with a band that's doing their own music. And so it was really, you know, we were mind-blowing to be knowing that, oh, this is how it happens.
This is how a real band. This is how a real band plays.
You know, the same thing with working with Saul and them. I mean, that again was a step up. These guys were better than the guys that we had previously worked with. So here we're working with two bands that are really great musicians.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like when you went in and started cutting demos? You know, how long did that take to sort of put that first record together? And tell me a little bit about what went into that, the blood, sweat, all that.
Can you start with torture?
And tears. and tears.
That was a unique experience for us. It's a big difference going up and singing live, you know, than going into the studio and trying to create a masterpiece. And we, in the beginning, were very green as far as what it took to go into the studio. As a matter of fact, we were so horrible that we would be fooling around and we had the giggling and being silly and, you know, so excited. It was basically nervous excitement, such that here had to tell us, John Bradley, right? Had to tell us to settle down, ladies, and let's get serious. Calm down and let's get serious.
And he was really very instrumental in putting us in a place that we started to take things seriously, because what we did a whole bunch of background vocals for a whole bunch of other people.
Exactly.
And Mark Radice and what was that?
Charles Erlin.
So this is how we sort of cut our eye teeth in the studio. And working with John Bradley and him having this very peaceful, calm, but professional attitude, he sort of gave us like, okay, ladies, this is real, and y'all can be excited, but we're gonna work.
He was the good cop to our bad cop.
Now, see, I was gonna get around to that,
but you know what?
Because I'm so go ahead, Bonnie.
I have to say that Saul wasn't that bad, and that's because Saul had sisters. So he knew that. He knew the sister thing. He knew He knew the crying thing.
Yes. You have to treat us a little more gently, for heaven's sake. Randy was a task master. He had this way of saying, do it again, do it again, do it again. Because remember, when we were first recording, they didn't have all this technology, right, Solomon?
No auto-tune, no, very little of sampling and then flying it in. You sung every
track.
Thing that was on, everything that was on, every vocal that was on the record was sung.
That's right.
It wasn't copied and pasted.
That's right. And so trying to just work with that sometimes became very difficult for us, because it sounded fine to us, sounded good to me, but Randy wanted it, and Solomon, they wanted that to come across a certain way. And I think that's when we learned how to emote. You know what I'm saying? Because when you're recording, you know, you have to make it either sound happy or sound sad or sound tender. If somebody's watching you perform live, they can see your emotion. But I think we quickly learned that in that studio, you have to be able to let those emotions come through without people seeing you. So there were many nights of tears and late nights, and just when you thought it was done, it wasn't done. But I think that has made us better at what we do now. I think that's all part of the foundation of, being vocalists. And I also want to say that having had the training we did in high school as vocalists, it made a big difference.
But now that also was a kind of a downfall, because we were so used to singing and pronouncing and enunciating every word that they had to make us learn how to cut the words off. I said, well, that's not
because we were singing classic, more classical pieces.
When you mentioned that there was a thread between the groups in that area, with Randy, myself, that's what they're referring, because they're referring to, we were trying to sort of shape and sculpt a particular sound and style. And again, it wasn't the correct necessarily pronunciation of words, and it wasn't a correct sort of straightforward feel. It was a funk feel, and it was a funk feel that was like really kind of native to our area, Brooklyn, which was East New York. And Randy, he grew up in there. I grew up there. We had some of the same influences, and we both, with his group and with mine, we both were looking for that sort of funk style that sort of cut us a little apart from what everybody else was doing. I mean, you might have had Confunction down south. They were doing something else, but they didn't sound like brass. They were a horn group. It was a whole different feel.
Yeah. So that studio business was
experience.
It was an experience.
A big experience.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to ask you how you would describe that sound, because to me, I mean, it had that very kind of distinctive double drum beat thing, and it was very prominent with the keyboards, and of course you have the horns, and some of the string arrangements.
Yeah.
How would you? Is there any kind of way you would summarize what that sound was? the sound of
you have to define that, Solomon, because
we named our production company Alligator Bid'em because we were listening to sort of a twangy type of guitar, funky feel. And we said to ourselves, it sounded like the Alligator Bid'em when he played it. And so our style again was Brooklyn funk, and we mixed dance with it, we mixed rock with it, and us versus brass, we had a more vocal mix to it, and brass was just straight out funk chant, and we were more funk, semi-chant, and sing.
Because as you guys always said, our vocals, the sort of set a signature sound that nobody else, I don't care who you mentioned out there, had the same sound that Skyy had. You know what I mean? Because of those guys and their incredible, instrumental prowess. And then here we come with the nice sweet voices when required.
Make it sweet, but not too sweet.
Too sweet.
And then on top of it, Saul sang as well.
Exactly.
So it was a mixture of not only our vocals, but Solomon's vocals as well.
Yes.
Yeah. When I think back in that era, which I love, there were a lot of R&B bands that had females up front and primarily, male bands, but not so much the configuration that you guys had. I'm thinking maybe the closest thing might have been like the Emotions when they worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire. I don't know. Do you see any similarity there?
Well, that's a great kind of comparison. Again, compared to Earth, Wind, and Fire, certainly, one of the more successful groups
on the funk side. Yeah, we went as a big band with the horn arrangements and everything. We still sort of stayed close to basically a regular 4-piece kind of, in some cases five, counting the 2 guitars.
Right.
and then it would be sort of salt and peppered arrangements of you know, strings and on some songs, strings and horns.
Yeah.
But we were, you know, basically still just originally a funk band with classy vocals.
Well, what I thought you did so great was integrating, you know, some dance and disco kind of elements, but not going overboard with that, and still keeping, you know, pretty funky. And it was just a nice balance that you hit.
Yeah, at that time, you know, most disco groups had no face, had no real performance, and when we had to have stuff that we can get in front of an audience and perform and sort of move them, and not just play, you know,
a repetitive beat.
Disco track.
Yeah.
So we kind of even had that sort of as a start point, and then sort of evolved into a sort of a more evolved into what we are. You know,
Exactly.
Because it's a unique. I mean, I don't know how you could define us apart from everybody else. It was just the Skyy sound. You know, I can't put my finger on it because we combined funk, we combined disco, we had a little jazz and some of our stuff. You know what I mean?
Slow tune. We had
ballads. Yeah,
we had it all. You know what I'm saying? We had it all.
Definitely. Yeah. The alligator thing makes me think of like Louisiana, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Tony Joe White was one of the artists that we were listening to. That he might have been from Louisiana.
There you go.
Yep.
So that first record, I mean, it came out, just was thumping. You know, I mean, I'm looking back at it. I mean, just the first 3 tracks. This groove is bad. First time around. First time around. Let's turn it out. I mean, what a way to launch it off. So I mean, you guys must have been thrilled with the way it came out.
We were
shocked and surprised.
We were
thrilled that it was finished.
Yeah.
Thrilled that it was sold.
Right.
And thrilled that people enjoyed it when we got out in front of them. And we were saying, let's turn it out. They were turning it out.
Yeah, for sure.
And how many times did Larry the Band do first time around? We had like 3 or 4 different mixes of first time around, and every time we did a show, we was like, okay, which one are we doing? Because I mean, every city we had to do it was a different mix that we had to do. So it was like, we're cutting these steps off. Okay, we're putting these steps in. It was just an amazing ride for that song.
It was a big excitement because Saul kind of led us into it. We were at rehearsal to tell us that the record had been sold, and then just the first time actually to hear it on vinyl was really a thrill for all of us, because back then you really worked on an album, almost a year. Am I right?
No, we didn't work that long.
Well,
it seemed like it.
It's the first album always seems long because it is a long process. Because you do a couple of songs that they don't quite make it, then you do some more songs.
I was going. That's what I was going to say. I remember recording an awful lot of songs.
The first song could have been 2 years in the making, but the second ones and the ones that came after that. We didn't have the luxury of taking a whole year.
Right.
And who came up with the name and the spelling?
Can you even remember? I remember we're sitting down trying to discuss it, and I don't know who said it, but whoever said it, I said, yeah, that's it.
Well, again, we often said we were influenced by the time, the sci-fi movies at the time, and the television show Star Trek was very popular and emerging, sort of, and so we had this spacey kind of concept, idea about the sky and the clouds and being ever changing, and our music being, that's where the Denzalian dream came from.
The Denzalian came after we picked the name.
After we picked the name,
yeah.
But we kind of came up with it collectively. I think we had the dictionary open one time, and we're just going like this. How about that? No, that won't work, But we settled on Skyy because
I still don't know who said it.
I don't know.
That's so long
I don't
ago.
remember if
But I know you were the one that said put the extra Y.
Okay.
He's the one that said put the extra Y.
So you came out looking like you came from another planet. I mean, you had the outfits and everything. How did you guys feel about that? Who picked them out? Was that a lot of fun?
We had a designer, didn't?
No.
The first ones didn't.
Randy's
what?
Randy Muller's wife,
Right.
Denise,
Right.
designed the first 4 or 5 sets of outfits, correct? And Skyway, Skyport. Yeah, she designed those. She was actually an emerging seamstress designer.
Right, designer.
And
Well,
our
she was
project
But
was
wasn't
probably
the first guy Mossato?
no, Masato didn't
Came
make
after.
the first
The
blue.
first white with blue?
So the
With
blues
the
with
hoods.
blues with the hoods. That
Who
was
made
that
those?
was. I can't
I
remember.
want to say it was Denise.
I think it was Denise.
Yeah.
She did the. She didn't do the first.
She didn't.
I think that no, Masato did the first.
Masato did.
Masato did it first. Now it's coming back.
Yeah, because he took
Brain cells are churning.
Yeah. And we got fitted. And
Yeah, Masato did the first.
Because he was
And
the one that got the
then
Denise
flashy
did
ones.
all the ones after
Yeah, she
that.
did the white jumpsuit with the piping.
And the rings.
Yes.
and the rings.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we wanted dramatic.
Once we had settled on Skyy, we were going full tilt. And we had a whole concept of where we came from.
Yeah.
As you can see, the first album we were on spaceships, so we obviously weren't,
Of this world.
here.
We weren't of this world.
And our show, during the show, we also had lightsabers and
That's right. Yes.
and stone helmets,
That sure did.
and we did the whole Star Wars attack, and
Yeah.
we were having a good time.
Yes, we did.
The force was with you. It was 1979.
That's right. That's great, Scott.
So did you actually tour on the first record, or did you have a couple first? You did. So who'd you go out with on the first tour?
Goodness gracious.
You going way back
Right,
in with our
oh,
brain
boy.
We
remember.
on the first,
Evelyn
we went out
Champagne
Evelyn
came.
Champagne. We went out with Sister Sledge.
Oh, yeah.
We went out with Chaka
With James.
Khan. We went out with
Rick
the
James.
Jones Brothers. We went out with Rick James. We went out with
Wow.
a lot of
Benny King. Remember, and
Benny
I'm
King.
thinking about the first
Yeah,
show.
I'm trying to think of the first ones.
Yep.
Because it wasn't like a consistent tour.
Right.
Yeah.
In the
Right.
very first, when we did that first album, we were here and then we were back. We were there, we were
dispersing.
back.
Yeah,
Because we didn't have a consistent.
Right, we did a lot of medium sized rooms where we were the only act, and
I remember we did the garage.
when we started doing large arenas, it was probably around the end of the first album and the beginning of the second album.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So the second album in 1980 was Skyway, and you guys still had the pretty cool outfits, but you were toning it down, starting to tone it down a little bit. I
You
think.
know,
Well, we're now on the planet here.
Right.
Yeah, so the 80s, you decided you'd come to Earth. And another great record, started off with High and Sky Zoo, and again, it just starts so powerfully. What was different in making the second one from the first one?
The writing.
The difference was it was a shorter period of time. They were a little more knowledgeable about how things are supposed to happen in the studio, and less crying.
Less crying is right.
because they saw the end results. Okay, we're going back in here.
Right.
We're going to make some more, and we're going to go back out
Right.
on the road and have some more fun.
Right.
So that it was
Let's cry.
yeah, it was easier.
Yes.
It was
And High, I think, was just this really great vocally. It was a great, fun song for us to sing and do. You know what I mean? It's still to this day one of our favorites. Sky Zoo. I'm glad that you mentioned that because we were talking about it last night. It was the part two of Let's Turn It Out, where we initially used the Kazoos, found it to be just a really novel idea, right? And then Solomon,
we when we were doing Let's Turn It Out, we didn't have horn players. Brass had the horn players,
Right.
but I said, okay, we don't have the horn players. We can have Sky Zoo players.
Right.
He's a great Sky, because when you can sing, you can actually play a note. So after we put those Sky Zoos on Let's Turn It Out, I said, this.
What a gift.
What a gimmick!
This Skyzoo needs its own song.
Right.
It needs it, and it became one of our signature, instruments here. So we coined them Skyzoos, and we made a song for it, and then they were able to really expand it, take more solos, and
Right. And I also think the fun part about it was because we got them for the audiences as well. So this was a way for us to bring the audience right into the show, because anybody can play a kazoo. Is once they figure out that a Skyzoo, sorry, Solomon, that you hum, don't blow. This is the most important thing that anybody needs to know about playing a Skyzoo. So the first thing people want to do is when they pick it up, they want to blow into it, and that is going to get you no sound. So we get the looks like, what's wrong with this thing? It must be broken. And then we say hum, don't blow, and guess what? Sound. So it was it was just fun. That's what I like to say.
And people to this day still want to hear that song.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got into that. I was definitely gonna ask you about the kazoo. So did you end up actually having ones that had Sky on them, or did you merchandise them at all?
Yes.
We sure did.
Yes,
we sure did. We had the official Skyzoo. I have to say this about, it's very interesting about the company that produces those things. This is just a side note, because we still maintain an amazing relationship with the very same company from which we used to get the kazoos back in the early years. So they're called Kazooby Kazoo, and they're based in, I think, still in South Carolina. And they provided the kazoos then, but we had metal kazoos then, right?
Yes. But now, now they are mostly plastic. But we still do actually have, kazoos that say Skyzoo.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll send you one.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, we'll send you.
I want one. I gotta have it. So it must have sounded tremendous though when the audience was doing that. Do you have anyone that videotape that? Or?
Well, you know what? Interestingly, my sisters and I in 2007, we tried to create a Guinness Book of World Records for the largest kazoo band. Right. And we did that at the Harlem State Office building for the Summer Stage concert series. We got 2,900 people. We passed out kazoos to all these people. You have to understand that doing a Guinness World Record is a very exacting task, because you have to make sure that you document every kazoo that's distributed. We also were able to, you have to have an expert kazooist. There has to be somebody that declares everyone an expert. So we had a woman by the name of Barbara Stewart came, and everyone in the audience had to play the kazoo. So we gave them the hum, don't blow direction, right? And then we started the song Skyzoo. And there is footage of that on YouTube, as a matter of fact. And I think it's Ladies of SKYY.
Harlem Summer Stage.
Harlem Summer Stage. Harlem Summer Stage. And we were very pleased that it was covered by CBS News. Yes. We actually got a little piece of that show talked about on CBS's Sunday morning show, because Barbara was featured on that show, and she included our Guinness World Record attempt in terms of playing the kazoo. So
that's great.
Now I wanted to do it again, but since the world records changed so quickly, so as a matter of fact, we didn't win the record then, because simultaneously to us trying that attempt, somebody else was doing it in another in another town. But now I think it's up to something like 6,000 or 7,000, and the the criteria becomes so much more exacting when you get to those kinds of numbers, because then you literally have to know exactly how many people you have, separate them into 50s and 100s, and it's a whole big thing. So maybe we'll try it. We'll attempt it at some point.